Have you ever had a desire that made you stop and think, what's wrong with me? I have. Just the thought alone used to make my heart race, my face burn, and all I wanted was to bury it deep where no one could ever find it. Before I go any further, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the conversations we have here on Hi Day Psych. The kind of conversations most people avoid, but everyone secretly needs. Trust me, the next few minutes might change the way you see yourself. When I was younger, I thought there was only one right version of sex, the kind society approves of. Everything else? Wrong, dirty, shameful. The problem was, my desires didn't fit neatly into that so-called normal box. I found myself drawn to role-play, to power dynamics, to scenarios that weren't exactly vanilla. And that's when shame started to creep in. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even let myself think about it too long. I just hid it away, convinced that if people found out, they'd see me as broken. But over time, I learned something that flipped my perspective. Kinks aren't the problem. The silence and the judgment around them are. The more I hid, the more out of control I felt. I turned to unhealthy ways of coping and then hated myself afterwards. The cycle wasn't because the kink itself was dangerous, but because I was too afraid to face it openly. When society judges, we retreat into secrecy. And secrecy is never the place where self-understanding grows. I also began to see connections between kinks and the past. Some desires aren't just random. They echo earlier experiences. Someone who once felt powerless might crave control later on. Someone who once had their boundaries violated might feel safe exploring submission in a consensual space where they finally get to say, stop. For me, those moments of feeling powerless as a kid planted seeds. Later, I gravitated toward power dynamics, not because I wanted to relive the pain, but because my mind was trying to reclaim balance. That doesn't mean every kink is born of trauma. Many are simply preferences, ways to add excitement. But what matters isn't the kink itself. It's why we turn to it. Is it about joy, or is it about escape? Another lesson that saved me was this: fantasy does not equal reality. There were times I panicked over the scenarios that played out in my imagination. I thought, if I picture this, does it mean I actually want it? But the truth is, the brain knows how to compartmentalize. Some people fantasize about surrender, but are leaders in daily life. Others imagine losing control, but are fiercely independent outside the bedroom. The fantasy serves a psychological need, but it doesn't dictate who you are or what you must do. Not every thought needs to be acted on. Some fantasies are safest when they stay in your head. The danger comes when you never stop to ask, where is this coming from? What does it mean for me? Once you understand the source, you have the power to decide, keep it as imagination or explore it safely and consensually. But here's where I really got it wrong. There was a time I used kink not for pleasure, but as a way to run from reality. I wasn't happy in my relationship, but instead of being honest, I tried to cover it up with more extreme experiences. I remember one night vividly. After a brutal argument with my girlfriend, instead of staying and talking it out, I left. I found someone willing to play out the kink I thought would fix me for a few hours. And for those hours it did. I felt powerful. I felt in control. But when it was over and silence filled the room, I looked around and realized I was still alone. Worse, I felt emptier than before. And then the guilt hit. I had betrayed trust. I hadn't solved anything. I had layered shame on top of pain. That night as I lay awake, I understood the kink wasn't the problem. Using it to avoid responsibility and real emotions was. It was like drinking to forget. Temporary relief, long-term damage. That mistake taught me three things. First, I had to ask myself honestly, am I seeking joy or am I running from fear? Pleasure leaves you lighter. Escape leaves you hollow. Second, safety and consent aren't optional. They're everything. Boundaries aren't just a yes or no. They're a continuous conversation between people who respect each other. Third, silence is heavier than truth. At first, I only wrote about my desires in a journal. Then I confided in a close friend. Eventually, I learned to talk to my partner. Every time I spoke, the weight lifted. The kink itself had never been the burden. It was the shame and secrecy wrapped around it. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Kinks don't make you broken. They don't erase your worth. They are simply one piece of the complex human experience. What matters isn't whether you have them, but how you engage with them. You can choose shame and silence, or you can choose awareness and freedom. I've walked both paths, and I promise, the second one feels a lot lighter. If you've ever felt embarrassed about a kink, remember you're not alone. You're not broken. You deserve to be understood, to be safe, and to be real with yourself. If this video made you think, share your reflections, or just drop a simple comment, I hear you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can keep joining me here on Hi Day Psych, where we dare to talk about the hard stuff